Hello and welcome to the Combined Joint Task Force's DCS Refresher Course video series. This lesson will cover the AV-8B Night Attack Harrier and is intended to assist you in getting back up to speed if you haven't flown for a while. As with all our refresher courses, this will not be an in-depth tutorial, but rather a fairly fast-paced review of the aircraft systems and procedures. If you need assistance with a specific topic, check the description below to see if it is covered and jump directly to that section. Before I begin the startup procedure, I'd like to touch on the INS alignment methods. The quickest and easiest is the pre-alignment, which simulates the ground crew setting it up before you enter the pit. It must be enabled through the Special Options tab. This is the one I'll be using during the startup. However, since some mission makers may disable this option, or you might just enjoy the manual version, I will cover both the ground and sea manual align procedure at the end of the video. Also, keep in mind, if your mission is at nighttime or if it's going to be transitioning from day to nighttime and you want to use NVG goggles, check your back right corner to ensure that your NVG case is loaded in. This can be enabled via the editor or in the mission via Right-Alt-Right Shift 9, but it can only be done while the engines are off. The NVGs will also need to be loaded onto the helmet via key bindings that are not set by default. You can go to Adjust Controls, Search, NVG, and you need to set up Switch the Helmet Visor for NVG, as well as the Helmet Visor toggle. When you enable the switch, you'll get a message in the top right and tells you it takes about 4 minutes to turn it on, or rather install it. Also, when you're starting your engine, if the engine isn't spooling up, go ahead and check that your throttle hasn't been bumped from the off to idle position, because that will prevent it from starting up. If it has, go ahead and click the throttle cutoff lever over here and it will bump it back. Alright, let's begin the startup procedure. We'll begin on the right hand side with closing the canopy, turning on the battery, engine starter, come over to the fuel cutoff lever in the DECS, turn on the oxygen, left and right fuel pumps, as well as the flap power, kill the warnings, turn on our left and right displays, as well as both radios, the brightness for the radios and upfront controller, brightness for the HUD. We're going to be waiting for 92 RPMs here. Go ahead and turn on our RWR, set our countermeasure dispenser to auto. 92, go ahead and bump our throttle forward to idle. Alright, once you've loaded a ECM pod, if you're going to be using one, go ahead and rotate this around to RCV. If you're not using ECM, don't do it, otherwise you'll get a constant 2 lights down here in your panel. Go ahead and set a bingo state if you want. Turn your radio on down here to TR plus G for guard, transmit and receive. Top wedding cake here will be your sidearm volume, your interior lights, exterior lights, as well as your exterior light master mode switch. And slap stick to the side. Since we're using the pre-align, just rotate to nav, turn on your FLIR, DMT, Jackson seat handle over here, come across your anti-skid. If you're going to be on a carrier or on the ground and need more control, go ahead and leave it in NWS. That gives you both nose wheel steering and your nose wheel steering high gain. When you're taking off, go ahead and put it into the on position. You'll notice that even though it's in the on position, the skid light over here has not illuminated. The reason for that is your park brake is still on. So you can go ahead and click on your park brake and you'll notice the skid light disappears. If your skid light is in, or rather your anti-skid is set to nose wheel steering, you'll still have that light illuminated. So when you're checking your panel before takeoff, if that skid is on, either your anti-skid is set to nose wheel steering or your park brake's on. And that's pretty much it. Now I would like to discuss how to set up radio frequencies, use the TACAN, the all-weather landing system, as well as set up the altitude warning system and the NAV FLIR. Alright, so for your radios down here, you either click on the left or right COM 1 and 2, and that will show you the current selected station for that channel. You can rotate with the mouse wheel to switch through your channels. To change a frequency, you would simply choose the channel you want, input the frequency, hit enter, so that'd be for 129. You can enter a decimal for 129.5 and rotate off, come back to 1 to be that channel. That is the same procedure for both radios. For your TACAN, you simply hit TC. Come down here real quick, go to the EHSD, turn off the map. And so we select our TACAN, we can change our frequency to whatever we want. Hit enter, and then that's the channel to turn it on. Click your on and off. From here, once it is on, you can choose whether you want it to transmit and receive, just receive, and if you want it to be air-to-air or not. So for a tanker, you'd set it up in that format. You can also change X or Y here. Also, when you have the TACAN on, if you have a waypoint selected, it'll be following the waypoint. You would need to hit the TCN to make sure that you're navigating off of the TACAN. For the all-weather landing system, you click the AWL, and then you'll need to choose one of the preset channels. To see the channels, simply open your kneeboard and reference the AWLS channel list on there. Although I'm on Syria right now and they don't actually have any NATO bases set up with the AWLS on it, so I can't show you, but you would simply just input the frequency, hit enter, turn it on, and then you would need to select the AWLS to navigate to it. Once you're within the glide slope, you will have the symbology on the HUD. Let me go ahead and turn that off. Alright, the altitude, the ALT down here, that's your altitude warning. Currently it's set to 500 feet, so anytime you go underneath that, you're going to get the master caution and the warning saying, low altitude. You can disable it by simply just turning it off, or you can change the altitude that it alerts you at simply by changing it and hitting that. Also, I wanted to touch on the NAV FLIR, since it is one of the cool features of this aircraft. First, you'll need to have the HUD in night mode down here, and then you'll want to hit the sensor select right to bring up the NAV FLIR on your display over here. You can also hit it again to cycle between white hot, black hot, and then you simply need to hit the HUD reject button, whatever you have that set to transpose it onto the HUD up here. It is a amazing tool at nighttime when you're trying to navigate and attack targets. Alright, next I'm going to cover how to create and edit waypoints, as well as how to use the F10 map to create target points, which are useful for both JDAM and slaving the DMT or TGP to targets when you're downrange. Alright, so for creating and editing waypoints, first we'll come over to the HSI and select data, which will put you into the editing mode. You can either select the waypoint down here that you're wanting to edit, of which I currently have 3 waypoints, or you can come up to the upfront controller, select one or whatever waypoint you want to edit, and then hit enter, which will automatically switch you to that waypoint. To edit it, you would simply come over. You can edit the elevation or the position. If you're wanting to switch the position, you would have to click on it once to switch the northing, click it again to switch the easting, and then of course you would, if you're on the easting, you would hit 6 for the E, and then you would input the coordinates in a 322 format. To create a new waypoint, you simply have to enter a number greater than the current highest waypoint. So since we have 3, I could do 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, whatever, and it will create a 4th waypoint. So just to show, we've got 1, 2, 3. I'll hit 8, enter, and you see that it has now created a 4th waypoint. Go ahead and hit position. Since it's showing 3, 2, 2, I know that's my easting. I want to do my northing first, so I'm going to hit it again. So where it's 2, 2, 2. And then I'm going to input my coordinates, which I know from having looked at my F10 map that I have an EWR at these coordinates. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my 2 for N, then 3, 5, 5, 5, 4, 1, enter. And then you need to come across, hit position to switch to your easting, then 6 for E, then 0, 3, 6, 3, 0, 2, 1, enter. And again, this will create the waypoint there. It'll put it at ground level. If you're wanting to make a flight waypoint for a flight plan, then of course you'd want to raise it up off the deck by using the elevation. Currently, the elevation at that location is going to be roughly 697 feet, so it's already set. That's how you create and edit waypoints. I'm out of data here. Go into the F10 map. We'll go to our target range. Over here, this is the location where I just made that waypoint for. As you can see, I've got 10 targets out here that are BTR 80s. To make the data points, first you want to create a waypoint that's just in the general area of your target range. This is going to be when you have these set up for a JDAM. If you put multiple targets in, it's going to give you a flight waypoint to the center one, the first one that you put that has no name on it. So you kind of want to be in the general area where you're going to be attacking. Go ahead and create a target here. You need to name all of your target points capital T01 through T18. That's the maximum number you can have is 18. Alright, I'll go ahead and pick up back the video once I have made all of these points. Now note that I did not place all of the numbers in order. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 7, 10. And this is to showcase they don't have to be in order. As you're approaching the target, it will auto-populate them in the order from the closest to the furthest from you, depending on which direction you approach the target. Go ahead and come out of that. Alright, now that those targets have been input into the map, we now need to enter them into the computer. If you reference your kneeboard, under the page that has target list on it, it'll give you the key bindings that you have. By default, they are right alt, right shift, and 8. I'm going to go ahead and go to the cast page, RCall, so you can see that there's nothing in here. So I'm going to hold right shift, right alt, hit 8, boom, and it just populated all 10 of those coordinates from the F10 map that I just input. Alright, a few things I wanted to touch on while discussing this cast page over here is when you create those points on the ground, it'll auto-populate the T1 through TX to show that those are your target points over here. If you do it in the air, it will not have those target points, but you can assign them in the air. To do so, you'd simply choose whichever one you want to make a target point by cycling up and down here. Then you would come back to the cast page, hit use, and then you would enter a number 1 through 10 here, hit enter, and then it will change that one. Also, just to show, let me come across over to this side. If you go to the cast page, RCall, and then you just choose one of these, whichever one you want. Hit RCall again, it will bring up these buttons up here. You can actually remove your points by hitting the erase right here button, and it'll erase those off there. Alright, now that we're airborne, I briefly wanted to discuss the autopilot in the Harrier as it differs slightly from other aircraft. Talking about the automatic flight control switch here and the altitude hold switch here. So the automatic flight control switch in the Harrier kind of acts like an auto trim for the aircraft. So let me go ahead and unpause here real quick and I'll show you what I mean. Alright, so if we're flying along and we want to pitch up to 5 degrees, go ahead and put it there, our flight vector there, and then engage the AFC, go hands off stick, and it will hold right there where we're at. And of course, if we're near level and we engage it, it'll hold us, and then we can also engage the altitude hold, and it will hold our altitude, and we can make small adjustments and movements. Go ahead and re-engage the altitude in the FC, and this will put us in an orbit. But when I mean that the FC is kind of a auto trim, let me go ahead and center myself out here, re-engage it. Let's say you drop a bomb, fire a Maverick, and your wings are asymmetrical and they've got, you're fighting it to the side. You can level yourself out, activate your AFC. I've got mine on a HOTAS button press, so I don't have to keep looking down and flipping the switch. Once you've engaged it, let it run for a second or two, and then you can disengage it with the button press, and it will leave you centered out. To show what it'll mean, if I go ahead and use my trim hat, and I'll put in some right trim, so you see how I'm rolling. This is hands off stick. This is just me with trim. I can fight the trim out with the stick itself, put myself flying level again, and then activate my AFC to hold. Now I'm hands off stick, it's running true, and if I disable my AFC, you'll notice that I'm now running true again because it countered out the trim that I'd put in before. And you can use this for bombs, so if you got that asymmetrical load, instead of manually trimming out, you can fight it out with your stick real quick, get yourself lined up level, activate your AFC, then deactivate it, and it will trim you back out level wing flight. Next, I'll discuss the Harrier's built-in laser spot search capabilities, as well as the controls for the TPOD and how to change your laser code. When sensor select switch apt once, you can bring up the laser spot search page. This will function even if you don't have a TPOD. Up here on the upfront controller, you can see the current selected laser code that it's searching for. Also, I'd like you to take note that on the TPOD, the code it is using is currently 1682 as well. This is the code that the TPOD will spot search for, as well as laze if you're lasing for yourself. To change that code, bring up either the DMT with the code boxed or the laser spot search page with the code box, and then on the upfront controller, just go ahead and type in your new code 1688, hit enter. Now take note that even the TPOD page has updated to 1688. Out here in front of me, I have a group of targets being lased on 1688 by JTAC, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to the laser spot search page. You'll notice an X that floats back across the HUD. Now all you need to do is put your HUD over the target area, and it will snap to the target. Note that the DMT automatically locks onto the target as well. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and show you the TPOD controls. Select the TPOD, you will need to hit standby to activate. If you wish to control it with your TDC, go ahead and hit the push button beside TDC. You hit slave, it'll slave it to your DMT if it doesn't do it automatically. Around the outside, up here in the top left, the CCD is for the daytime TV. If you click that, it'll switch it to FLIR. Straight across, you have your white hot, black hot toggle. You've got your zoom in and zoom out in stages. The stage is here in the center, as well as your wide field and narrow field of view. Down here is your area track and point track, and here is your inertial track and LSS, though the default built-in LSS is going to give you a wider field of view than the TGP will. Alright, there's also HOTAS controls for the TPOD. If you hit your HUD reject twice rapidly, it'll switch your sensor select switch left, right, and down into HOTAS controls for this. So your sensor select aft short press will switch you between area and point track. Down here, it switches between that. If you press and hold it for 1 second or more, it will switch it back to the INR track. If you press left short, it will switch you between wide and narrow field of view. If you press and hold it for 1 second or more and release, it'll put you in laser spot search mode. And then it found the laser because I was already pointing at it. If you hit sensor select right short, it will switch you between white hot and black hot. If you press sensor select right and hold for 1 second or more and release, it switches you between CCD and FLIR. HUD reject up twice to come out of that, and of course you can nose wheel steer to unlock. To laze for yourself, you need to come up to the top of the TPOD, and when you first turn on the TPOD, it will always be in training laser. You will need to switch this from TR and L to either marker for a IR laser for other pilots to see, or an actual laser to laser designate. And you have to unsafe the laser. The LRNG stands for laser ranging. This is useful whenever you are making mark points for the TOO mode for JDAM strikes. The fire is to fire the current laser configuration you have over here. You just click it, toggle it on, and then you'll need to click it again to toggle it off. Also, if you have a waypoint or a target point selected over here, you can hit the DESG for designate, and it will slave the TPOD to it. If you remember, that fourth waypoint I created during the startup procedure was on the EWR out here, and there you go, you can go ahead and see it. Next, we will cover ground attack munitions. Before I speak about specific ordnance though, I briefly wanted to touch on the CCIP mode of the Harrier, as it has some unique functionality. We'll go ahead and select my Mark 82s down here. First I'm going to go to air to ground, master arm on. Make sure anytime you select bombs that you set your fusing as it's going to be in safe mode. You can do it via the switch down here or the fusing button up here. Go ahead and select impact. Alright, you can switch between CCRP and CCIP mode by hitting your cage on cage button. As you will see here in CCIP mode, I have this dash line and dash cross. That means that my bomb impact point is below my HUD where it can't be seen. This line here indicates how far below my HUD it is. As I dive down, if I was to, this line would begin to go down and eventually hit the cross. The cross would go solid, and that would let me know that my bomb impact point is ahead of me in my HUD and is stable, and the bomb will hit roughly where it's pointed. The functionality of it that is unique is while it is in this dash mode and the actual bomb impact point is below my nose, if I press and release my pickle button short, let me go ahead and turn my DMT on real quick. If I press my pickle button and release, it will make a mark point where the cross is, and it will slave the DMT to it. Then I can hit my nose wheel steering uncage button to foresight back my DMT. Now if I were to press and hold the pickle button, it would not only mark that location, but it would also go into CCRP mode, which would allow me to do a loft bomb or whatever I wish to do. I'll showcase that here in a second. Alright, and again, if you dive down and you get the solid cross, that was where your bombs are going to impact. I'm going to go ahead and showcase a CCIP to CCRP handover. By getting the cross relatively on the target and then pressing and holding, I can actually pull up, bombs come off. See down there on the DMT that my mark was in between a couple of vehicles. First weapon we're going to cover will be the Laser Maverick. The laser code for it is changed the same way that the laser spot search code is changed. We'll come over and select the LMAV. Up here you'll see this X that indicates the search of the Laser Maverick. Whenever I unpause, it'll begin to sweep looking for the laser. When it finds, you'll get the same diamond box configuration. Go ahead and turn on my DMT over here. All the Mavericks need to be ran from the stores page so you can get the actual information for it. I'm going to go ahead and unpause and uncage, and it instantly grabbed it because we were already pointed at it. We're within the minimum range of the missile, so I'll go ahead and rifle. And that's all it is. Maverick is extremely easy to use. If you're lasing for yourself, you'll need to make sure that you don't mask your TPOD. If someone else is lasing for you, like a JTAC or something, you can egress immediately. Next, we'll discuss the IR Mavericks, and I'd like to take this opportunity to illustrate what I was talking about during the startup when we were making the target points in the F10 map, and I said that those mark points could be used for more than just JDAM strikes. So when you have those target points, you can use your waypoint selector here. There's our T10 that we made, and you can see it out there, and we can actually designate that and make that our center point of interest for our DMT and our TPOD and our Mavericks. I'm going to come across over here to my TPOD, and I'll turn it on. And as you can see, that is one of those vehicles that we marked out there before. Go ahead and put it in FLIR. Come across, like I said, with the laser maps, you need to be on the stores page. I've already selected the IR maps. Now when I uncage, you can see the IR map screen here. Go ahead and click the FOV button to go to narrow field of view. The IR maps can be put on target either using their own camera, which is a bit wonky because they're not stabilized, and any movement in the aircraft will translate into further movement into this camera. So it's way easier to use the TPOD or the DMT to find targets and then switch over and use the IR map to actually engage them. So up here in the top corner you'll see TV. That means that the controls right now are being done on the right screen, and when you let go they will update on the MAV. So as you can see, it moved there and I move over here. To control the MAV directly, you need to go sensor select up once, and you'll notice that in the top left corner over here it now says IR MAV. If I move the IR MAV off, it will pop off and move where it wants to, and if you press the TDC depress action, it will force the IR MAV to lock. So I'll go ahead and unpause here, get flying towards the target. Just went TV down, and now you can see I'm controlling my DMT. I can go back over, sensor select forward, I'm on the IR MAV, and I can control the IR MAV. As you can see, I'm attempting to lock the MAV up by moving the MAV directly, and all the oscillation in the aircraft is being translated into the Maverick camera and magnified. Alright, I've got a lock, rifle.
Infield, 1-1. Abort, abort, abort. You have no permission.
Yeah, that would be the JTAC giving me an earful because I'm not using the ordnance he requested. Jack 1. Now I'm going to go over LGBs such as the GBU-12 or GBU-54, and I'm going to be lasing for myself this time. You can see down here on the TPOD that I have a target selected. I'm going to go ahead and start firing my laser. Over here on the left, let's select my GBU-12s and not forget to select my fusing. As you can see, I've already got the CCRP drop line. All I got to do is fly that. Let me go ahead and unpause here. As the vertical line comes down, you press and hold pickle.
Abort, abort, abort. You have no permission.
Again, ignore the JTAC. He's still out there, angry I'm dropping on wrong targets. Also, you may have noticed I changed my code to 1682 so that it would not conflict with the JTAC. We'll go ahead and slightly adjust my target position. Boom, shack. And that's as simple as the GBU-12s are. Don't forget to turn off your laser. Now we will cover JDAMs. I will begin by conducting a 10 JDAM strike pass on the 10 targets that we made in the F10 map during the startup procedure. I'll start by selecting my J82s, setting the fuse to instant, and then selecting the targets that I wish to drop on. As you note, as soon as I click one, it adds it to the current selected list, and as you add more, they continue to populate in. X is the 10th one. As you'll note up here, they are not in sequence from 1 to 10, they are in sequence as they are closest to me. So the 10th one is the closest, then the 9th, 8th, and in that order going away from me. You'll also note that the DMT slave down here, as well as I have a HUD steering up here. Those are both going to be pointed towards that central marker, the very first one I placed that had no number on it. Go ahead and come down here and select the EHSD. So if you fly towards that steer point, especially if your targets are kind of spread out, you may not go directly to it. So instead, use your EHSD and reference the circles. These are all the points in their maximum launch ranges of the outside circles, their minimum are the inside. Alright, I'll go ahead and start flying to it and pick up when I'm closer. Alright, as you note, as I approach the rings, I will begin to get a countdown timer underneath this once the rings start to unwind. That's indicating the bomb accuracy. You want to drop when it's about 100%. There's unwinding now. We're at 30, 40, 50. When it hits 100, I will pickle, 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 pickle. All 10 bombs away. As you can see from that pass, the last 2 targets were actually missed. That's cause of 1 of 2 reasons. One, the vehicle started moving, which is one of the drawbacks of using a JDAM, because they hit where you put the coordinates, not where the target might be when they impact. And 2, my mark points may not have been that accurate because I didn't zoom all the way in on the map. So you want to make sure that when you're placing those mark points in the F10 map that you zoom all the way in so they can be as accurate as possible. And if you're going to do a pass like that on a vehicle group, expect to have some misses if the vehicles start moving. That's where the GBU-54s will come in handy a little bit more, because you can actually drop a bomb on one and lays on the second if you drop in a 2 pass to make sure that the second bomb to hit will actually track the target. Next, we will be discussing JDAM delivery via the target of opportunity mode. Gone ahead and set up my J82s, but note that I do not have any target selected. The target data is going to come from a target point we're going to create using the TPOD. Also note that I have my crosshairs kind of near the bottom of the vehicle. That's just a good practice to get into. When we click the laser range button up here, it will only last a few seconds. During that time, we will need to press and hold our waypoint increment button for 1 second or more. The waypoint increment button is right Windows W by default, but I've gone ahead and set up one up on my HOTAS as well. So when we press and hold the button, you'll get the line underneath as well as the flashing R. Press and hold your waypoint increment, then release. Now you will have the JDAM release queue up here, and then you just fly and drop the bomb as normal. Also note, in the current version of the Harrier, if you create this waypoint within the maximum launch range, let me go ahead and come over here. If I were to create this inside this ring, sometimes you would not get the release symbology. To fix that, you would need to press and hold your waypoint increment button to remove the target point, and then press and hold it again to re-add it. Go ahead and unpause here. And just as with the prior planning mode, we just fly towards the target, EHSD. Then you want to release at about 100% for the maximum chance of accuracy. Next, we'll briefly discuss the sidearms. If you remember, I put a waypoint number 4, out here at this target range on an early warning radar system, which is right there, Diamond. I did that so I would have the range to it. Currently, we're just a little over 10 miles. The sidearm seeker, when you activate it, you'll get that tone, and there we go. It already locked. Go ahead and turn it off. To control that tone, again, that is the top wedding cake over here. The seeker head is roughly about 10 miles. It'll actually grab onto it, but the missile itself has a far greater range than that. You can actually launch it from outside of the seeker head's lock-on range. You can lob it, and it will actually fly towards the radar emitter. And as long as within 10 miles the seeker head is pointed in the general vicinity of that emitter, it will lock on and track it. I'll go ahead and fire this one from here in lock range, and then I'll go ahead and fire one from outside of lock range to show you. So we got our tone. We'll go ahead and pitch up just a little bit. Magnum. Got our sidearm here, tracking in on the EWR that's right there. Alright, I've went ahead and reset the range. As you can see, we are now just a little over 19 miles out from that EWR that is still at our waypoint 4. The distance that you can launch these things at is going to depend on both your speed and your altitude. The higher you are and the faster you are, the further they'll go. You just need to kind of remember that you got to lob them in to where they'll be coming down in the general vicinity of your emitter for it to lock on and track. I'll go ahead and attempt to demonstrate that now. Going to get my sidearms active. Magnuming 2 off. As you can see, the nose tipping down there, it detected the radar emitter and is now homing in. Alright, so let's just demonstrate that you can engage with those from well outside their lock range. Next, I wanted to quickly talk about the air-to-air capabilities of the Harrier, as it is capable of carrying 2 AIM-9s on the outer wing stations, as well as it can use its gun pod for air-to-air. The AIM-9 seeker head's audio is also controlled by the top wedding cake rotary here. And the AIM-9's controls, you have a dedicated AIM-9 bore sight switch and AIM-9 seam, as well as an air-to-air gun button. As with all AIM-9s, you get the growl tone. When you have a lock, the dash circle will go solid and the tone will change. Box 2. Splash 1. Got the second one over here. Alright, now that we're done with the weapon employment phase, I figured I'd go over the short takeoff and vertical landing capabilities of the Harrier. I'm going to begin by going down, menu, VREST, and go to my short takeoff page. This page can only be accessed if you're in the NAV or STOL master mode. The information that I'm going to be using from here is the NRAS, which is the nozzle rotation airspeed, and the NOS, which is my nozzle rotation angle that I need to get off the deck. This here is the minimum airspeed I need to reach before I rotate to 55 degrees to get airborne. So I'm going to use that along with my HUD. Since I'm in the VSTOL mode, I can see my nozzle rotation angle here, which is currently 10. I'm going to go ahead and push that up to 55. There we go. And then I'm going to use my nozzle stopper here, push that up to meet it. I bumped it just a little too far. And we're at 56, so I gotta go just a hair forward. And there we go, we're at 55. The purpose of this is so that when I'm to the end of the deck, I can just push it back and it will stop at 55 and I won't have to worry about trying to fine tune anything. Next, I'm gonna put my water into the takeoff mode and my flaps into the STOL mode, which they already are. And I'm good to go. So now I need to make sure that my nose wheel steering is in cast mode. A lot of things are going to happen really quickly. I'm going to hold down my toe brakes. I'm going to throttle up. Once my nose begins to dip to the deck, I'll release my wheel brakes and begin to roll down the deck. Once I pass around 91 miles, or right when I get to the end of the deck, whichever one happens first, I'm going to rotate my nozzles all the way back to 55 degrees. Jump off the deck. I'll put up my landing gear and begin to slowly rotate my nozzles back to 0. As I'm doing that, once it gets to about 0, I'll go ahead and put my H2 back into the off position and my flaps into auto. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. My wheels are beginning to sink in the front, releasing. Throttle back just a hair. Pull up, nozzle to 55. Gear up. Go ahead and start rotating my nozzles back from 55. Transitioning into level flight. Go ahead and turn my water off and put my flaps to auto. Go ahead and throttle back just a hair. And we are in level flight. And it's simple as that. The VRES page will update according to your weight, which you can find right here, as well as the various other temperature, the current wind direction, and it will update your nozzle rotation speed and your nozzle rotation airspeed accordingly. That's why you want to reference that. Alright, during the short takeoff, I forgot to mention that once you've transitioned to level flight, don't forget to move your stopper back to the back so it doesn't interfere when you're attempting to do vertical landings or anything else. My boat, the Tara, was out here at, let's see, go ahead, and I've got the TAC hand set up, select the TAC hand. Boat's out there at about 7.9 miles. I'm going to reference my VRES page real quick again. The vertical landing tab just to check my aircraft weight. I'm currently at 18,431. The weight you need to be at for vertical landings is below 20,755. If you're above that, you'll need to expend some ordnance or drop it via the jettison, or come over here to your left and right dump pumps and dump some fuel, and then just keep an eye on it. Once you're below that 20,755, you can go ahead and cut it off. Want to put my H2O into the landing, as well as put my flaps down into the STOL mode. As I'm approaching, when the aircraft gets below 250 knots or so, I'll lower the landing gear. That'll actually help create a little bit of drag and slow me down some more. And I'll set my nozzles back between 25 to 50 degrees, and then I'll just fly to try to place myself to the left of the boat. As I get down to around 150 knots, I will rotate the nozzle further back to 82 degrees, and from there I'll leave the nozzle alone and just use the throttle and stick and rudder controls to fly in and land on the boat. Alright, I'm coming up on 5 miles behind the boat. I'm going about 222, so I'm going to go ahead and lower my gear. Also, I'm going to put my nose wheel steering down to nose wheel steering. That way, when I land on the boat, I will have that immediately. Go ahead and start rotating my nozzles back to about 40 or so right now. And then I'm just flying to put myself up alongside the boat on the left-hand side. Here on the right side of the HUD, this is going to be my vertical velocity. So I'm decreasing altitude as I want to come up beside the boat. Notice my H2O usage so far is nil, as I'm putting no extra strain on the engines. Alright, we're down to 150 knots, so I'm going to go ahead and begin to rotate my nozzles back to 82 degrees. Notice the pitch up, that is from the STOL flaps. Alright, so readjusting. Take your time, use all precise inputs. Here I'm trying to pick up just a bit of speed, as I know the boat is going 20 knots and I've got a 10 knot headwind. I'm pushing my nose down slightly to gain a little bit of speed while using the throttles to make sure that I'm flying level. As you can see from the tape on the right side. Now as I get close and attempt to match speed, I'll have to come back on the stick slowly while decreasing throttle. Make sure that I don't pop up too much. Like that. That was just a very small movement, but it translated into a large drop. So that's fine. If I'm coming up beside the boat, I want to be down roughly near the deck altitude, just slightly above. Drop a little bit more altitude. Start easing back slightly on the stick. It's always a bit nerve-wracking, but just take your time. Don't rush it. Worst comes to worst, go around. Of course, this is going to be your hardest part here, coming up abreast of the boat and matching speed. And then make sure that you're not dropping or gaining too much altitude. Rudders to make sure that your nose stays somewhat pointed forward. Go ahead and slip on over. And set her down. That was a bit rough, but she's on the boat. Alright, now I'm going to cover the manual INS alignment procedure both from the sea and from land. We're going to start off by contacting ground crew and having them attach the ground power. This is not for the power though, we're looking for the SINS cable connection.
Chief, turn on the ground power.
Now you'll see up here it'll say SINS cable when it's connected.
Ground power is now on.
That cable is what is going to bring us the current position of the boat in our current position, so we don't have to manually input any coordinates. Go ahead and go to the EHSD data. To bring up the align page. Go ahead and move your INS knob to C. And that's it for the align. Everything else just start up as normal. Alright, as you can see, we have now been aligned. We just come down here and rotate the INS knob to nav and we are good to go. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cover the manual align from ground. I'm going to start by going to the EHSD page and then waiting until the engine has been spooled up. Then we will click data and A/C. This will bring us into our line page. Up here you'll note that the latitude and longitude and magnetic variation are both zeroed out. Go ahead and open your kneeboard, and in the initial position on the first page you'll see the latitude long and the magnetic variation. We're going to input that up here. It's automatically selected to the lat, so go ahead and input first your 2 for north and then 362140, enter. Then we're going to press the position button once and then hit 6 for the easting and then 0361650, enter. Come over, press the push button next to MVAR for the magnetic variation. From the kneeboard I know it's an easting, so I'm going to go ahead and hit 6 again and then enter 4.7, enter. Now I just come down to my INS knob and rotate it to INS ground. We'll get some cautions, just go ahead and clear that, and then we just need to wait for the align to finish. Once it comes down to 0.7, it will go OK, then just rotate to nav and you are good to go. That covers both the manual versions of the align, and that concludes this refresher course video over the DCS AV-8B Night Attack Harrier. Thank you for your time and attention.